Hello everyone and welcome back to another video in the Frogger Replica series. So we'll start this video off real quick with just going through and talking about what our program does so far. We'll start adding to it very shortly. So let me just go comment. So function setup is just, it runs once at the beginning. Okay, I cannot spell, but that's okay. I guess that's how you spell it. And then this is runs once per frame. So with this function right here, setup, runs once at the beginning. So what we're doing is we have a global variable called road, and then road is being called a new constructor. This road constructor right here is being called, and that variable, that object that's being returned, is going to be stored in the road variable now after setup. And then every frame, that same road variable is going to be displayed. So what we want to do now is in this road, we have an array of lanes. So it's going to say the lanes that this road that are part of this road. So these are all the lanes that are actually going to be in the road. Now these lanes will control the cars in the lane, whether or not the frog is in the lane, that kind of stuff. And then we add to this lane a new lane that has a y coordinate of 0. Now for now, the y coordinate doesn't do anything because we're drawing the lane from here. So what I want to start with doing now is creating a lane draw function. So what's going to happen is this lane is going to draw itself basically onto the screen at its y position. Okay, so draws the lane at the given y position, at its own y position, which is called this.y. Right? Okay, so we have road here. What we're going to do is essentially right here where we're drawing a rectangle, we're going to want to do that. So we're going to, in display, we're going to first obviously push and pop just like normal, just so we don't get any weird drawing colors that we set before that we don't want right now. Then we're going to fill with the color that we decided last time, which was 120, 120, 120. Perfect. There we go. And then we're going to, again, stroke 0, 0, 0, which is black, and then stroke weight, the width of the line, we'll keep it as 1. There we go, perfect. And what we will do now is we're going to draw a rectangle. Now this rectangle, now here are all the variables that go into the rectangle. There's an x, y, width, height, and then these are all things that we don't need for now. So we'll do rectangles. X is going to always be 0 because we always want the lane to start at the leftmost side of the road. If we go over here, we always want the lane to start from x equals 0 from here. We never want it to start halfway through the road because we want to imagine the cars are coming from off of the screen, driving that way. So the rectangle is going to always start at 0 right here. Now it's y, this is where the fun part comes in. We have a y value here that tells us where we want to draw the lane. So we'll draw this dot y, which basically means this instance of the lane, every time it's created, there's a new instance being created. This instance of the lane's y value. And then width, we always is going to be 800 again, because that's going to be our constant. Let's see if I can pull in the constant from the previous episode right up here. Then, and height, now this is where we're going to have this right here, this static variable lane height, because all lanes are the same height, so we don't need to store it in a specific instance-based variable, which is again why we use static variables like we discussed last time. So it's going to be lane.lane height. So now we should be drawing a rectangle onto the screen here. Now let's go on to here, and instead of saying this.lanes.length, every single lane, we're going to change this for loop, and we're just going to call for every single one of the lanes in our array. We're going to call the lane this dot lanes. We're going to get that specific lane that we're talking about in the array, and then we're going to display it. So we're going to call, so this dot lanes is an array. We're going through every single thing in the lanes array, and then for every single one of them, we're going to call its own display function on it, which is basically just going to run this for each lane. But for now, we only have one lane, and it's at 0. So we should, let's get rid of this right here, all of this. We don't even need to push or pop anymore. There we go. And now we should call it, and nothing changed, you see? So the lane is still being drawn at 0, 0. But here's the important part. If I change this to 10, and we go back to here, boom, it moved down 10. So that's exactly what we wanted to do. We wanted to be able to change the lanes based on this y coordinate in the lane. So now let's try adding a few lanes. Let's add one at 0. And then let's add another one at like like 800 or something, not 800. We'll go 400. So there should be 2 lanes now, completely separate. Perfect. Okay. So everything is working correctly, just like we wanted. So now what we want to do is we want to have a new function, because as we discussed in a previous episode, we want the lanes to start moving slowly upwards. All right, so back to the drawing that we were working on last time. What I want to do is store a variable. Okay, let's just write var for now, and it's going to be called speed. Okay, forgive my writing. So the speed is going to be a number. Let's just call it 3 for now. And what we want to happen is every single frame, let's make that a semicolon. Every single frame, we want the lanes to move by that speed. Because what we want to have is like an infinite scroller. So as we discussed before, we're going to have the lanes, just like here, the lanes are going to be scrolling downwards. And that's going to have the effect of looking like the frog is moving upwards. So what we'll do is have the lanes move by a speed, which is going to be, let's call it, so it's going to be measured in pixels per frame, right? So it's how many pixels are moved per frame. So we'll do that right there. And there's the second lane, third lane, whatever it is. So every frame, we want to increment all the lane's Y positions by this speed, okay? So what's going to happen is it'll have the effect of over time, the lanes are going to slowly start moving downwards, right? Because we're incrementing it by Y. And then as those lanes move downwards by that much speed. Perfect. Okay. Cool. Let's go back and see if we can try to implement that now. So we'll call this, so inside the road, we'll have a constant, right? Again, not a constant, sorry, a static variable. Because we don't want every road to have its own speed, we should just call the speed variable 1. So let's call it static. We'll call it road or lane speed. And that's going to be like, let's just say it 3 as I said it before. And every frame, let's call it increment. Let's call a new function called increment. That's basically going to go through every single one of the lanes, just like we did before, but instead of displaying it, it's going to increment them. Right? Now, I don't want to have to go and call a new function that just increments it by 1, which we could, but I'll just do it like this. So it's just this.lanes.y ++, right? It's easy enough. I don't need a whole new function to do it because it's just one line. If this was more than one line, I'd probably put it in its own function. But there we go. That should work. So now every time, oh, sorry, not plus equals road.lane speed. Because every single frame, we want to add to the y value of the lane this number right here, 3. So there we go. Now let's go to display. And after we display the road, let's road.increment. And then now if we refresh it, we'll see that nothing happens, and that's because in our road we don't have any lanes actually called. So let's just make a new lane. So this.lanes.push, we'll push to the lanes array a new lane, and the lane will just be at 0 for now. So it'll start at the top left. So let's take a look at what happens. There we go. So as you can see, this is what happens when their lane speed is 1. Let's set it to 3 like we decided before, and let's see how fast that moves. Okay. So it's good to see that actually the lane is being drawn. Now, what we want is every single one of the lanes we have to increment at the same speed. So let's just test that as well. Let's add a few new lanes. Let's make this one at 0. Let's make this one at 100. Let's make this one at 200. And we should see all the 3 lanes are moving together. Perfect. That's exactly what we would like. There we go. Okay, good. Setup, everything is perfect. Okay, so perfect. So now I think we can start fiddling around with 3. I think 3 is a bit too fast if we look at it. I think 1 might be a better value. Let me actually add a new lane. This dot lanes dot push is a new lane 0. There we go. Okay, so here we go. So the lane, that seems like a pretty decent speed, because as a human playing, you're going to have to make a lot of decisions while you're playing it, right? So now what we want to do essentially is I don't want to have to be creating a new lane every single time. I don't want to have to do it manually. I want to be able to create a new lane at the next available space. So what we're going to do is we're going to make a new function, and we're going to call it add lane. Okay, so that basically, let's just quickly add lane. What does add lane do? Adds a lane on top of the last lane in the road object. So if we go back to right here, essentially we'll have this lane here. When we call add lane, we basically will just add a new lane up here on top of it. And it's going to be exactly correctly set up like that. Okay, so it's going to be exactly the correct distance up. So the way we're going to do that is, first off, we're going to go and say let last y is just going to be the y value of the last lane. Okay, so it's going to be last y is this dot lanes, and it's going to be the last one. Now to get the last in JavaScript, we could just go and we say this dot lanes dot length -1. That's the last lane, and it's going to be its y value that we're trying to extract. Then what we're going to do is we're going to increment it by the width of each lane. So we're going to say, and then we're going to create a new lane. So we're going to say this dot lanes dot add dot push is going to be a new lane, which is going to be the last y plus the lane dot lane height that we decided before. So what happens is every time we write add lane, it's going to just push a new lane. Now, there's one small thing. We need to just check real quick if there's no lanes at all in the thing. If there isn't, we just add one with the y value of 0. So if this dot lanes dot length is equal to 0, or it will say if it's smaller than 1, then we're going to this dot lanes dot push new lane 0. Okay, and then else we want to do this stuff that we just said. There we go. And now add lane should work. So let's go right here. Here is the one lane. Let's go, what did we call it? Road.add lane. We can write it up here and we should see, there we go. The lane is being added. Oh, so there's a problem. We're adding it actually below. That's not what I wanted. I said here that we want to add a lane on top of. So the problem is we're not meant to be adding the lane height. We're meant to be subtracting the lane height from the last y. There we go. So then now we should see everything working. If we call the same function, there we go. Now we're adding a lane every single time we want it to. Perfect. Now, as we discussed also in the previous episode, we also, whenever this lane leaves the screen, we don't want to be drawing it anymore, right? So we want to delete that last lane whenever it leaves the screen. But we'll talk about leaving the screen later. So for now, what we are going to do is we're going to create a new function called delete lane. And what delete lane is going to do is delete the first lane in the list. So when I say first, I mean the first one that was ever added, and last is the last one that was ever added. So that's what we're doing right there. Okay, so delete lane last. So we're going to basically say, okay, so since we want to delete the first element in an array, what we want to do is we want to say this dot lanes, and there's a JavaScript function called shift that does exactly that. So we can actually read with this library here what shift actually does, which we'll do right now. It removes the first element in an array and returns it. Now, since we don't really need it, we'll just delete it and we don't care about it anymore. And that hopefully the garbage collection will take care of it. So whenever we call delete lane, it should delete the first lane in the list. So let's go and play again. Here's the lane. Okay, so let's add a lane first, and then it's road.delete lane after that. Boom, perfect. So now let's add a lane. Let's add a lane, delete a lane. Add a lane, delete a lane. Perfect. So everything works exactly like we wanted. So now what we want to do is every single frame, depending on how the road is working, we want to add a lane or delete a lane, right? So we want to, depending on if the lane is outside of the screen, we want to delete that one, and then we want to add a new one on the top, okay? So for now, whenever we start, we want to figure out how many lanes we actually need to cover the entire screen, because we want to start with the lanes covering the entire screen, or pretty close to it. So let's start. Let's figure it out first. We will have like a little grace period for the beginning. We'll have the lanes start halfway. So let's draw this out just so I can explain exactly what I'm thinking. We have the screen looking exactly like this when we start, okay? We want to start drawing the first lanes from about halfway, just so there's a bit of sky here. And then we have the frog starting from right here. And then we'll have the lanes going here, here, all the way up, right? As many as we need. And then they're going to slowly go down. And then once this one reaches here, once that bottom lane reaches here, we delete it, and then we add a new one on top. So we want to figure out exactly how many we need so we never have a gap in our game board. So if we know the height of this screen right here is that thing that we called height at the beginning, the constant. All right, pardon my writing. And we also know that we have a lane height right here, which is called lane.lane height, right? So we can divide height by lane height to figure out exactly how many lanes we need. And using that, we can create an arbitrary amount of lanes at the beginning. So what we want to do is we'll say let begin lanes is just going to be a number, and it's going to be floor, because we don't want any floats. We want just to keep everything as integers. Float height divided by lane dot, well, it's capital lane dot lane height, and that's going to be how many lanes we begin with, right? Now, we're not really sure that this number is going to stay the same the entire time, because there could be a situation where we have an extra lane being added by accident, but we don't really care, to be honest, because all we want to know is when we begin, how many lanes we want, and then later on, it'll automatically be sorted out, and we can mess around with that in a bit as well. So we figure out exactly how many lanes we want, and then we're going to run a for loop. Let I equals 0, okay, and then we're going to say I is less than begin lanes, I plus plus. We're going to iterate through that array, and we're going to add a new lane each time. So this dot lanes, actually no, this dot add lane. I already created a new function, so this dot add lane. So now we're going to add exactly how many lanes we need. Now here's the thing. I want to start, as I said before, I want to start halfway, right? I don't want to really start from the bottom, because then the frog will die instantly. It won't have any time to figure out what's going on, or the player won't have any time to figure out what's going on. So we'll slowly start incrementing. We'll start it from like about halfway. So let's just make the first one. Let's add one lane first. So this dot lanes dot push, and we'll add the first one to the place we want to start. So it's going to be new lane. We'll make it like at 300, and we'll see how that works, and then we can mess from there. So let's take a look at how this looks. Okay, so that's about exactly what I wanted the thing to look. Let's see what happens when you reach the end. There should be exactly enough lanes, and then there's one extra one because we added one at the beginning, and then it's perfect. So there we go. So now that's exactly how we want to start. Everything is good, perfect. Now what we want to do is create the basic logic so that if a lane is at the end, we delete it, and we add a new lane at the top. So we're going to go inside, we'll make a new function, another new function. This is going to be called update. We'll call it check, right? So what check is going to do is it's just going to runs once per frame, checks various things that the road needs to keep track of, okay? Just for now, it's a pretty arbitrary function. We'll call it check for now. Okay, so what's going to happen is we're going to say if the last lane, or the first one actually is the first one. So if this dot lanes dot and since it's the first one, it's gonna be 0. If this dot lanes dot y, if it's bigger than 800 plus lane dot lane height, so if it's all the way off the screen, well, we'll call this height, right? So if it's all the way off the screen, if it's the screen's height plus a lane height off the screen, then this dot remove delete lane. That's what I called the function. There we go. And then this dot add lane as well. So now if we call check, so every frame we're gonna first check road dot check. Then we're gonna display it. Then we're gonna increment it. Okay, that order doesn't really matter, but here we go. So let's take a look. So we have the lanes coming down. We should see once this one goes completely off the screen. Right now, it should be deleted and added. There we go. So it did work. It's a bit delayed. I think we should add a few more lanes as a buffer just so that it can be good. But I think that's working exactly as we would like. Yep. So you can see the roads are being added at the top. Now let's add one more lane just so that this we don't see the sky right here. Now that lane will be added. Let's call it. Where should we do that? Let's just do that right here at the top. We're going to add a lane. Big lanes is going to be +1 because we want to add one more lane to what we think there should be. And let's take a look at that. That should be good. So this is the sky color that I chose. It's not going to be visible. Yep, there we go. Perfect, perfect, perfect. Everything works. And then let's just for the sake of it, let's go road.lanes, and we should just keep console.logging, making sure that there's always 10. So we're never keeping track of more than 10. You see that? So it's not like, even though we've seen like 30 different lanes already on the screen, there's only ever 10 at a time. So once we've gotten that, everything is going to flow perfectly from here on out. Next episode, we're going to be adding the cars onto the lanes. And then after that, we'll be adding the frog controls. So keep a lookout for that. It's really exciting. So we will end this episode off real quick by just git add everything, git commit dash message, lanes working, movement, and deletion. Perfect. There we go. Let's commit that. And we are good. So I'll see you in the next one.